Good morning. I'm Julio Saenz along with Mauricio Riveros. Today we'll meet Erika Rosenberg, the CEO of the Center for Governmental Research, and learn about the great work they're doing in Rochester and around the country.
You will be inspired.
Celebrating leaders in Rochester's unique and vibrant business community, we'll meet entrepreneurs whose passion and perseverance have helped push through life's challenges. Join us as we share their stories and journeys to success. It's time to be inspired.
Erika, thank you very much for being inspired. A show that we created to inspire our community, to interview people like you who are doing great things here in Rochester. So let's start learning who is Erika.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to come on the show. It's really great to be here. And I am President and CEO newly of something called the Center for Governmental Research, which some people in town know about, but we want more people to understand a little bit about what we do. And I know that's one of the reasons why you invited me. So I can just launch right into that, if that sounds good. CGR is an organization that's a nonprofit organization. It's been in existence here in Rochester for over 100 years. And we really specialize in doing data analysis and community analysis and stakeholder facilitation and really helping communities and organizations to look at their operations and needs and improve communities. So that's kind of our mission.
It is fascinating. I know very well CGR. I'm part of the CGR.
That's right.
I'm very proud of that. But I will say one thing that is fundamental is the beginning of CGR. CGR started here in Rochester.
That's right.
Eastman and Kodak has been contributed, established a foundation to really bring the data and the statistics, put the facts in place. So tell us a little bit about the story of CGR.
Yeah, you started telling that story, so thank you. But we are a creation, like many things that are wonderful in our community, of George Eastman. And when we were originally founded in 1915, we were called the Bureau for Municipal Research, and we were actually modeled after a similar organization in New York City that was started to try to combat corruption in government and really ensure that government was run for the benefit of the people and with efficient and effective practices. And so a lot of what George Eastman was really interested in doing was bringing kind of the best of the business world to local government. So we had a key role to play in many things that were set up around the city of Rochester, including the city charter, how the city manager operation got set up. And in fact, there's actually, I was looking at a list of our reports going all the way back to 1915, and we actually had several studies that were looking at fire hose specifications. So we did big things like look at the population of the city jail and talk about what, kind of challenges folks were facing, and then these very kind of small, granular, nitty-gritty things like how the fire hoses should be used and constructed. So local government was really a huge focus of CGRs right from the beginning, and it's still a big part of what we do today.
And so we'll fast forward to the present. What are some of the more recent projects that CGR has completed?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we still do a lot of work in local government, as I mentioned. Some of that is locally based. We've also exported our knowledge really to communities across the country, and that actually started decades and decades ago. Even in those early years, we were doing some studies in Ohio and other places nearby to help them, formulate their cities in the most efficient and effective ways as well. So more recently, in terms of important contributions that we've made to local government, we did a study on the Civilian Review Board a couple of years ago that really contributed to city officials and the public thinking about how to deal with the issue of police accountability. So recently the city voters approved that referendum to set up a police accountability board that would have independent investigative authority, and that was something that CGR had studied a few years ago to compare what we do in Rochester to other cities. So we're still really active with municipal issues, but we actually do a lot more work now. The biggest growing part of our business practice is work for foundations. So the philanthropic community is increasingly a client of ours, and we're doing studies that help foundations understand their communities better, look at the resources that are available in communities to address specific problems. Those can include things like early childhood education or lead poisoning is a recent study that we did in Buffalo, and help those foundations really understand how they can have the biggest impact on some of those issues in terms of filling in gaps in resources or working on different policies, things like that.
That is fundamental. Because any foundation needs to have indicators that allow them to understand what is the real input, the impact, and what is the real outcome in terms of what they are producing.
That's right.
Be able to produce and show results is fundamental. Now let's talk about economic development, because
Sure.
that I know has been also an important driving factor, and especially considering what the effort has been for now years here in Rochester. So tell us a little bit what CGR is doing in terms of economic development.
Sure. So most of the work that we do in economics is really focused on looking at economic impact. And so there's a lot of studies that we'll do for institutions, sometimes for organizations, to try to measure their impact on a community in terms of the economics. And so we have our chief economist, Kent Gardner, who you all probably know and many of the viewers will know, who has worked on studies over the years to say, you know, what is the direct economic impact, what is the indirect economic impact of a particular institution or maybe a set of institutions. So that's part of how we work on economic development. We also have a tool that we developed and that industrial development agencies across the state and in other economic development organizations in other states as well use to look at the economic impact that might result from proposed projects and weigh that against the tax benefits that would come to the community. And so it helps communities really assess whether they should invest tax dollars, whether they should grant tax credits, whether they should give incentives to developers, to businesses that want to expand or to locate in their area. So those are a couple of the ways that we work on economic development. And of course, that's really, as you mentioned, a key priority for all communities to try to increase economic development and increase in prosperity for everybody that lives here.
For the business owners that are watching the show, what are some of the insights that you would give us as far as what you see in the local economy?
Well, I think, you know, in the local economy, we are certainly challenged, but we have some new efforts that are going on, led by actually my predecessor in the CEO role at CGR, Joe Stefko, and our local business community, the Constellation Brands folks, Rob Sands, the Chamber, GRE, Greater Rochester Enterprise, are all working to kind of streamline economic development efforts, to increase the investment in economic development here in town, to actually attract more economic developers and attract more businesses. So some of that work was actually sparked by a CGR study that we did a couple years back, comparing what we do locally with economic development to what other cities do and trying to bring in some of those best practices. And that led to some other studies being done and really this whole new effort, which is called ROC 2025. And so there's going to be, as you were talking about indicators and measuring progress, some specific goals being set, and then really an effort to not only measure progress against those goals, but to kind of change the narrative about the Rochester community and help people understand really what a talented workforce we have here, and the fact that there are many jobs that need to be filled and could be filled by folks, and that we have a workforce to support new businesses coming in as well. So I think there are some exciting things that are happening and some new efforts and hopefully some new energy, and it'll give us that boost that we need.
What I love of CGR is the versatility and capacity to adopt and be holistic, touch different topics,
That's
different
right.
areas. And also I know that you have been also doing some studies about education and how we can change one of the challenges in the city is the education system. What the things that you can tell us about education?
Yeah, education is an area that we work on from time to time. We're not always doing necessarily an education study, but we're always kind of nibbling at the edges. And you've definitely identified, I think, one of the things that really makes CGR special, which is that we don't specialize just in one area. We do work across a number of different areas, and so education is certainly one of those. And I can share with you, I was at MCC today delivering Monroe Community College. I try not to use acronyms without explaining what they are, so even though most people know what MCC is, but we have done some work for them recently, helping them look at their pipeline for students. And so we did some surveys and focus groups, talking with people who started the application process but didn't complete it, also looking at people who were accepted to the college but didn't enroll, and then looking at people who had attended but didn't finish, and trying to talk to those people and gather some of their input on why MCC didn't work for them at that time and what might really make a difference for them. And one of the really wonderful things about this study was that all those three of those groups that we talked to they really want to come back to MCC. They really see MCC as a high value place for them, a place that they really need to reconnect with in order to reach their business, their career aspirations. And so we really were able to talk to the college today about how this really represents an opportunity and hopefully some of the ways that they can draw some of those students back to the campus. So that's one of the recent projects that we've done around education. Certainly trying to work on the policies and the struggles connected to the Rochester City School District is something that is really important to us at CGR and the whole community, and something we've engaged on in the past and may engage on a little bit more directly in the future too.
We live in such an age of information overload.
Yes, we do.
I'm very curious, in your opinion, has research gotten easier to do or harder to do?
Well, I think research has gotten a lot easier to do. If I think about when I was starting out in journalism, and you had to use the reverse lookups for the city directory even to kind of locate a lot of things, and so much is available online now. But you're right, we are kind of swimming in this sea of information and data, and so I think what's really needed now from journalism, which is my background, and institutions like CGR that are trying to serve that mission of community improvement is the distillation, right? Like what's really important to focus on, what is the data and the information we really need to make decisions. So that's where we try to step in when we're working with organizations, when we're working with communities, is to help kind of boil down all that information as something that can really help people think about what they're trying to work on and make the right decisions and the right investments and think carefully about policy and practice.
Thank you. After this, we'll be back with more of our interview with Erika.
Now, in that same line of conversation, you guys have plethora of information out there. How regular people can access to those studies, how people can get to understand what's happening in education or whatever CGR is doing. What is the platform, how that works?
Yeah, thank you. So we have an organizational website, of course, CGR.org, and really most of our reports are available through that website, and there's a search function so folks can go online and kind of sample our reports through various interfaces on the website, or they can do a search function to pull up something specific. We do ask people to give us their email address in order to access a report. That's because we want to know if you're interested in actually connecting with CGR further and talking to us about some work that we might be able to do. But we do make all of our reports available to the public unless there's a client that we're working with on something that's a little bit more sensitive and confidential, and then we may not publicize that broadly. But that's one way. We also are the providers of the data and the analysis on the ACT Rochester website, which I'm sure you guys know about and everyone should know about. It's a community clearinghouse of data on the Rochester community, the greater Rochester community, including our surrounding counties. Tracks a lot of information about health, the economy, education, financial security, all the things that you really need to know about how this community is faring, and it tracks it over time. And again, it's trying to sort of boil it down to key trends, and so that's also an important resource, I think, for our community, and that's available online at actrochester.org.
I asked earlier about some of the business insights that you see in the area. What about overall? What are some of the trends, some of the stories that you're pulling that that reporter background out and surveying and saying, like, look, if you were to talk to somebody from Chicago and tell them, these are some of the things that are going on in Rochester, what would some of those be? Sure,
that's great. So I think, Rochester unfortunately has some very entrenched social problems, like most urban centers, like most communities in our country. We have entrenched poverty. We have particularly high rates of poverty among children. We have a lot of racial disparities. When we look at the data on ACT Rochester, we see a lot of differences that are significant across racial groups, with African Americans and Hispanics often faring much worse on measures related to education, related to income, things like that. So we have those issues, and we know that those issues, in particular, when we talk about the racial disparities, those are our historical legacy as a country that has not had equal opportunity. And so as a community, one of the things we're doing, and I know you two know about this, is we're trying to work more from a systems approach and across sectors with some new efforts to really try to drive change in those entrenched social problems. So we have efforts like the Rochester Monroe Anti-Poverty Initiative. We have Rock the Future, which is focused on education. And those are things that CGR supports in a variety of ways. And I hope in the next year or two can really actually get more involved in trying to support with data, with analysis, with that ability to help kind of distill, what are the most important things to really focus on here to try to drive positive change. So I think Rochester is a place that is on a trajectory, hopefully, for some serious improvement, but I don't think we can be Pollyanna about it and say that everything is going to be, fixed in a couple of years. It's going to take some really hard work and people pulling together, I think, in some new ways. But I see a lot of strong leaders in place. I mean, I think about Jamie Saunders at the United Way. I think about Megan Deschâteauvieux at Willow Domestic Violence Center, and I see people in the community who I think are really smart and really effective and will be wonderful partners for driving some of that change.
Definitely, I agree. There is a momentum.
Yeah.
And I think we need to continue that momentum. Now, if I am a private owner, I have any business, does CGR provide those type of services to private companies?
We don't do as much work in the private sector as we do in the government sector and in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector. So it's not to say that we wouldn't work for a private company. I think we certainly would, particularly if there was a focus to the work around community improvement, because that really is our mission. And we have done in the past, and we're actually going to be doing work currently. We have a new contract that's getting signed with the Chamber of Commerce. Locally, so certainly efforts to kind of support the business community broadly speaking with analysis and with information, and in particular one of the kinds of studies we really love to do is looking at other communities and how they've tackled problems and bringing that to Rochester so that Rochester can really benefit from the learning that's taking place in other places and avoid mistakes hopefully and do things even better than they've been done in other places. So we certainly support the local business community, at least in those kind of aggregate ways, and would be open to doing other kinds of projects as well.
Very good. And if you are someone that is heading up an organization, a business, or a nonprofit organization, when should you seek original research versus relying on third-party research?
I mean, I think that is probably something that the business owner or the organization leader is in the best position to assess. But I would say, whenever somebody's kind of struggling with a problem, and I mean, we all go on the internet now and start looking before we do anything else. But when people are kind of feeling lost by their Googling, that would be a good time to think about contacting an organization like CGR or another consultant that can help. Again, part of what we do is that sort of really doing that work for you. So we might consider it a literature review. We might consider it a community scan, is sort of, taking that broad brush to learn as much as we can about something really quickly and bring the most important information to you to think about solutions.
Erika, 100+ years, CGR doing great work. Where is the future?
Yeah, and I'm really proud that we've been in existence so long, and definitely want to keep it going for 100 more years, of course, right? I think our future is going to be something that we talk a lot about, refining the vision over the next year internally. So we're going to be doing some work with our staff. We have 13 staff members, and then we have a board of 19, of which you're one of the members. So it's a little bit in process, that whole sharpening the vision for the future, but I certainly see us continuing to do a lot of work in local government. That's been our biggest area of expertise over all those decades. I do see us increasing our support for the philanthropic sector, for increasing our support for these collaborative community change efforts. I see us really moving more in the direction of, as an organization, and then how we work with community toward racial equity, with a focus on not just racial equity, but equity in general. I mean, that's something we increasingly encounter with clients, is folks that really want to elevate equity as one of their leading principles and something they really want to drive through the different projects that they're doing. So I see us increasing our own capacity to do that work in the community. And as an organization, it's one of the things we're working on internally, is to diversify our staff and to make sure that we have the right capacities and really can connect with all different elements of our community in a meaningful way.
And what you offer is so unique. How do you see the organization expanding, continuing to expand regionally, maybe nationally?
Yeah, we do work quite a bit outside of Rochester now, and I think that we will continue to do that as much as we can, but we also want to, I think, put a little bit more focus, at least in the next year or so, into growing what we can do in Rochester. And so part of that, as I mentioned before, is increasing our efforts to support those collective impact initiatives. So I would see in the next year that kind of being an area of real focus and concern, is sort of increasing our local footprint and making sure that wherever we think the services we offer can be of value and kind of help move this community change work forward, we want to make sure that we're at least making that case and trying to participate in those efforts.
I am amazed with the amount of knowledge and wisdom that CGR provide to our community, and I think it's fundamental to continue to expand the work and really have the synergies and continue with those synergies and partnerships that will develop the alliances that will take CGR and our community to the next level.
Yeah.
Erika, thank you very much for all the work that you are doing and the vision setting that take the other 100 years to come for a great organization here in Rochester. And I am sure that we will have you here again for an interview to see the progress in that great vision that you are establishing. Thank you very much for being in our show today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Okay. Thanks.
Coming up next week on Be Inspired, we'll meet the owners of a brand new marketing company, Meshing Movement. To watch today's episode and the complete interviews of our guests, go to rochesterfirst.com/beinspired. For more great talk with Rochester's entrepreneurs, listen to Poder 97.1, Saturdays at 9 a.m. For Mauricio Riveros, I'm Julio Sáenz. We'll see you next week on Be Inspired.